Hi, this is Todd, and welcome to the Thrive Singles Podcast. Whether you're single again or still single, stop hating being single and learn to thrive. Welcome back to the Thrive Singles Podcast. It's good to have you back with me today. My name is Todd. Today I'm throwing in a bonus episode using a blog post from a few months back. Today's subject is sexual temptation. What's a Christian single to do? Just like the siren song in Greek mythology lured sailors to their death, the alluring call of sexual temptation relentlessly entices men and women to their spiritual death. This is one of the biggest things I dealt with when I became single again. I was a formerly married man with a healthy sex drive, accustomed to regular sex, so being single was hard at times. I have a feeling I'm not alone in this. The scriptures, a lifetime of anecdotes, and scientific research all back me up here. The sex drive is one of, if not the most powerful, of our human instincts. People, especially men, will ignore hunger, thirst, or sleep to satisfy their sexual urge. As far as we know, this has always been, and I don't see it changing anytime soon. The Apostle Paul wrote about temptation as being, and the King James translates it, such as is common to man. And it is indeed common. In fact, don't count on it ever going away, even if you get married. Having a lifetime sexual partner doesn't mean sexual temptation will somehow just disappear. The best thing to do is learn to deal with it now while you're single. Here are some ways to deal with the sexual temptation. All right, number one, see it as the enemy. I have a quote for you from my pastor for the last 30 years, Rene Monet. He said this, "God delivers us from our enemies, but He cannot deliver us from our friends." So, the first and most important step in overcoming sexual temptation is to see it as the enemy. See it as the evil, destructive thing it is. If you continue to see it as some minor nuisance or something that's okay to dabble in occasionally, you will eventually give in to it. I can't emphasize this enough. If you're going to stand in the time of sexual temptation, you must first see it as the enemy. And with this enemy, there's no room for compromise. Number two, don't give yourself the opportunity. That's a great strategy. Just don't put yourself in a position where you can act on your impulses. Put appropriate guardrails in place. These impulses have brought down stronger people than you. And yes, it would be great to once and for all become perfect and live impervious to temptation. But until that happens, and it probably won't, you need to have prudent guardrails in place to keep you from doing the things that your urges say you need, but your conscience says is wrong. Decide beforehand what you're going to do. If you wait till you're in the sexually tempting situation and then try to decide what to do, you've already lost the battle. Number three, and probably the most spiritual one here, run. For my Christian brothers and sisters, let me read a pertinent scripture. One day he, and this is talking about Joseph, went into the house to attend to his duties. He ran the house of a rich man named Potiphar. And none of the household servants was inside. She, Potiphar's wife, who had a thing for Joseph, caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. That's Genesis 39:11 and 12 in the New International Version. Now, in that instance, Joseph was not out looking for temptation. It found him. Sometimes, even if you properly prepare, carefully plan, and consciously avoid tempting situations, you can still find yourself in circumstances that will test your limits. The best advice I have for you, and if you find yourself in that position, do like Joseph did. Run. When his boss's wife came on to him, danger, danger, he did the godliest thing possible at that moment. He fled. He made tracks. He RUNNOFT. He bolted. He hightailed it. He skedaddled. In other words, he promptly removed himself from the possible disaster. Be sure to put that tool in your emergency kit and break it out when necessary. Any good strategist will tell you there's no shame in a well-timed, strategic retreat. Be wise enough to know when you need to withdraw and regroup. Number 4, fill your mind with good things. I was recently reminded of 2 experiments. There was an experiment where people were divided into 2 groups. One was told to think about a white bear. This was actually called the white bear experiment. You can look it up on Google. And one was told not to think about a white bear. After a 5-minute period, both groups were told they could think about anything they wished. Guess which group thought more about a white bear? In another experiment, people were divided into 3 groups. One group was told, think about chocolate. And in one group, they were told, don't think about chocolate. And in the third group, there was no mention of chocolate. Now, in the second phase of the experiment, guess which group ate the most chocolate? In both cases, when people were told not to think about something, there was a rebound effect, and they thought about it more. So obviously, trying not to think about sex is counterproductive. Instead, it would be better to fill your mind with other things. Here again, I refer to Scripture, and this time I defer to the Apostle Paul's considerable wisdom. Think on these things that are honest, just, pure, lovely, good, and praiseworthy. Fill your mind and spirit with so much good that there's no room for the impure. On the other hand, if you feed your mind a diet of songs, movies, videos, and conversation about inappropriate sex, then you're just greasing the skids. Your fall is inevitable. Number 5, don't be overconfident. I strongly believe one of the reasons I was able to avoid indulging my sexual fantasies is because I knew I was capable of doing so. Among people who want to remain sexually pure, the people most likely to fall are the ones who think they never will. Because they think they're strong enough to never fall, they don't put those strong guardrails we talked about in point 1. They don't put those in place to protect themselves. Now, I, on the contrary, I knew how vulnerable I was, so I put measures in place to keep myself out of trouble. The safest route? Assume that in the right circumstances, you will mess up. Then make sure that's not possible for you to end up in those circumstances. And if you do somehow end up in a tempting situation, have a plan of action that you can fall back on. So let me end with a couple of questions. Number 1, how important is sexual purity to you? Because if it's not important, you're not going to follow any of these suggestions and you will fall. So how important is sexual purity to you? And the second question, what's the most effective way you've found to deal with sexual pressures? If you've been successful, let us know how you did it. Let's talk about it in the comment section on thrivesingles.com or on Facebook on our Thrive Singles ministry page or on Twitter @ThriveSingles. I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. See you next week. Till then, be sure to subscribe and go check out my extensive archive of past posts at thrivesingles.com. And thrive on.
Oh, thrive. Yeah, come alive. There's more to life. You gotta grow, you gotta thrive. Whoa, whoa, you gotta thrive. There's more to life than to just survive.